Alrighty, good evening everyone. Welcome to the Corning Museum of Glass in our very special presentation of Bring the Heat. This is a special program that's being live streamed, so welcome to everyone online as well, and those of you here in the audience. We've got Katie Hubbs, the one and only. Let's give her a big round of applause. She is our featured artist for this particular session, and Chris Rochelle is going to be the master of helper here on the end. Let's get him a little welcome as well. Awesome, thanks so much. My name is Helen, and I'm going to be narrating for you, but I'll be jumping in periodically to help as well. No applause necessary, but I'll be here for you folks. Aw, thank you so much. Thank you so much. But I'm going to be here to answer questions, but we also have Emily monitoring our online presence as well. So if you do have curiosities, feel free to get my attention so I can answer those, and I'll be helping Emily out with any questions from online as well. But this Bring the Heat program is something that we are doing in connection with the shops here at the Corning Museum of Glass. And we've had a couple sessions already, and it's been Thursday afternoons where we have an extra amount of time, and we're making beautiful pieces all featuring full-time staff here at the Corning Museum of Glass. So it's a really great way to highlight some of the people from our team and some of the wonderful talents that they have. And it's also a wonderful opportunity for you to support the museum because these pieces will all end up in the shops and available for sale. So Chris Rochelle was our first one of the season, and his sold immediately. But we also have Michael's from a couple weeks ago is now available online, so if you want to check that out. And we have one more coming up with Jesse Rassid in a couple weeks, so we're really excited to continue this tradition with some really wonderful pieces in this series. But I'm going to get you started telling you a little bit about what Katie is doing. And right now we're prepping because we are preparing to do a roll-up. Now, a roll-up is generally using cane, and I'll go a little bit more into what cane is, but we've got a very special version of this roll-up that she's going to do. So right now, Chris has been warming up some of these chunks of cane. I'll tell you a little bit in a while. And now Katie is gathering the collar that will attach all those canes to. So a collar is essentially a little glass donut on the end of our blowpipes. We want to make sure that this little glass donut matches the size of the sheet of cane that we have created on the pastorelli there, and we'll eventually be able to roll that sheet of glass onto the end of that blowpipe. Once we have that attached, then we've got the ability to make a bubble, and we'll make our piece from that bubble. So a lot of prep work has gone into coming to this moment of picking up those beautiful cane. So this tool that she is using, this is a pie divider. It does the math for us so that the diameter that she's measuring for the size of her collar has to match the distance of the side of the sheet. So this tool does the math where this is the distance of the sheet and this is the distance of our moil. Okay, we're just getting our angles of where we're going to film this. Make sure you get a good view. But what you're seeing right now in the camera is inside of our reheating chamber. We have two furnaces here at the Corning Museum of Glass, and this is the main furnace, melts all of our molten glass, and then the secondary units, like this one, reheat the glass as we're working. Both furnaces are set at around 2,100 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 1150 Celsius, and keeps everything nice and hot and toasty. Now that this glass has been melted just enough to where it's malleable, she'll attach and roll it up right on the end. Beautiful. Now we never roll all the way over because we want to make sure that the seams, the two edges of that sheet, end up matching perfectly and contacted in a nice even way. But that was a beautiful roll up to get started. Very nice. So she goes partial away, and now she has the flexibility to sit down, use a pair of tweezers, and guide that closed and make sure that the seam where they touch is really can't be seen in the future piece. So while she's coaxing that into place, I'll tell you a little bit about how she came to get the cane that she has. Now, Katie did a lot of experimentation to get to this final piece, but it all started with a filigrane cane. That's a really traditional approach, and we've got some really great display items up here on the front. If those of you that are in-house would like to come up forward later on, you're welcome to check these out. But a simple version of cane, here I'm piling everything right in Katie's way. A simple version of cane or filigrane would just be a chunk of color. You gather clear glass over top of it, you pull it out into a very long string between two irons, and then when you chop it up into small sections, it's those small sections that we call cane. There's a lot of ways of decorating vessels with that simple version of a filigrane cane. You can just roll it up onto the surface of a bubble or do a technique like Katie's doing to create a beautiful pattern. When you're using just the canes by themselves, they'll give you just one little line across the design of the piece. You can mix and match them in different ways and create a really unlimited number of patterns, and even use different colors than just white or one simple color. You can embed or overlay multiple layers of color and get a wide variety of designs from that. You can also take that simple individual cane and bundle it together to create more difficult or complicated patterns like twisty cane or zinfirico or veil cane. So we've got a few examples on our sheet here that they take a couple of the individual filigranes, put them together on the end of a pipe, you add glass around it, and when you pull to make that long cane, you twist as you pull. So that's how you get the little helix in the center of all those cane pieces. If you were to pick up the little canes on the outside of that mass of glass and still pull and twist, you're going to get a spiral like cage effect on the outside of that cane. So that's really kind of a traditional approach to using cane just to make simple and more complicated versions. But Katie has taken this even steps further. She has taken bundles of those individual cane. And you can see, if you look really carefully, we got a great camera view right now, they look like big chunks that she added to the side. Now those big chunks, I don't know, Brad, if you can get a quick look at that really quick. These are some of the examples of the big chunks that she was using. And if you look really carefully, we can see little bits of individual lines inside of there. So it started with a bundle like this. She takes that bundle, picks it up, warms up that bundle, and then pulls and stretches and folds it, pulls and stretches and folds it. So as she pulls and stretches and folds it back on itself, it starts to overlap all that depth of line, and it starts to create smaller lines as they stretch thinner and thinner. So it's a really interesting kind of wood grain pattern that ends up in the final iteration because of all those little canes. Thank you, Brad. Appreciate that. But if we were to just take standard white glass and try to do this process with it, the canes would tend, or the white glass would tend to kind of stretch and move and kind of wash out a little bit. So instead, she used a specialty kind of color called Duro. This is a color that's formulated to stay really stiff and true and not wash itself out when it's attached to other glass. And so those individual little lines with the white outside, no matter how much you pull it, you're going to still get a nice clean line out of it. So there she's accomplished sealing off the end of that tube. And since she's worked so hard for all those little parts, we're actually going to keep that little end piece from the end of it. It kind of looks like a little flower. And we can use that and use it as a decorative element later on. Attach it to the side of a vessel, maybe put it on a little cup or something, but keep all that beautiful technique for later on. But now you can see that she essentially has a bubble on the end of her pipe. So she can start to squish this in. It's sealed completely. There's no more holes or any gaps where those different pieces started to come together. And one of the really exciting things that she's done for this particular pickup, I was thinking we had her piece, was that when she laid out all these chunks, not only do we get some variation in the thickness of the white and the little bit of clear and how it overlaps, she's also purposely left chunks of clear glass as some of those cane that she rolled up. So by the time we finish this piece and blow it out completely, it'll have these beautiful little windows that'll let you look inside the vessel and really change the way the light plays with this pattern, and will really show off this technique beautifully. So that's a little hard to see from this angle, but by the time we blow this out, those windows will become more and more evident. Now, one of the things of adding windows or clear spots in the middle of a bunch of white duro cane is that means that the glass might want to move a little differently. So it's not necessarily individual colors that are tricky to work with, but generally the combination of colors that could get tricky to work with. Because some colors can be really soft and some colors can be really stiff. It kind of depends on the metals and the materials that go into those colors to create the different melting points, but some of it has to do with the fact that light things tend to reflect heat energy and dark things tend to absorb heat energy. So white is traditionally, whether it's duro or the standard whites, tend to be stiff colors because it's reflecting a lot of heat energy as it's trying to melt. So going back to our equipment, we've got our two furnaces. Again, this chamber that she's working in right now is over 2,000 degrees. So you might be curious how we're seeing inside of that furnace as we're working. But that's because of not a high temperature camera, but because of a high temperature resistant piece of glass. So there's a tiny window in the very back of our furnace called fused silica, and that helps protect the camera that's located outside of that unit. By having a very specialty glass formulated with different chemistries than our standard window glass, we can get it to survive the harsh temperature changes that happen in that furnace and not melt when it reaches those high temperatures of over 2,000 degrees. So that specialty glass was developed by the Corning Corporation back in the 1930s and has been used throughout history, partly for windshields going up into space as a heat-resistant material, and now is one of two glasses that are used cladded together to create fiber optics. So beyond protecting cameras, it also has a lot of really great use. But now we're to the point we've gotten all of our cane squished in together. She's sealed off the end. She's got everything as a nice starter bubble on the end of the iron. So now we get to go back to building up clear glass. And that's what we have in our main furnace here. We got about 1,000 pounds of clear molten glass, and it's about the consistency of honey inside of that furnace. So it's really hard to pull out large quantities at once, and we don't want to disturb this beautiful pattern that Katie's worked so hard to get. So she's allowing this first bubble to cool down to a chilly 1,000 degrees. At that temperature, our glass is rigid, and so when we go back into our furnace, we're going to be able to control that next layer and not have the first layer drip back into the furnace as well. So if we can build it up layer by layer until we get the amount of glass that we want, and I think you're gathering twice, is that right? Yes, okay. She's going for some scale today, folks, getting a nice big piece. So we also want to make sure it's thick enough that all those beautiful patterns are showing off as they should. So it really is, you need to make sure you have enough glass for the size and the thickness of the piece that you want to make. So while we're just waiting for glass to cool down, do we have any questions so far? No, nothing? All right, well, if you think of anything throughout the course of the demo, please let me know. So this is called the act of gathering. We also refer to the amount of glass as a gather. So now once Katie comes out, now we've got a nice, fresh, hot layer of glass right there on the end. Now because the outside's really hot, the inside's kind of cold, we want to make sure that this layer is nice and evenly distributed around that inside layer. So we tend to come back to our bench and use a wet wooden block to shape, center, and cool this fresh glass. These blocks are made of fruit woods like cherry, so they have nice tight grain patterns, and that tight grain pattern serves us well for two different reasons. One, we don't want this to catch on fire and burn out unevenly. If we're using something like pine, it tends to burn unevenly and would leave ridges on the inside of that tool, leaving texture onto our glass. But more importantly, we want that tight grain pattern to hold lots of water. You might have noticed she dipped that block behind her into a bucket of water. And that's because if you put 2,000 degree material up against dry wood, what do you think is going to happen? It's going to burn, right? It's going to catch on fire and it's going to stick to our glass. So we don't want any tools sticking to our glass. We want them to ride over nice and smooth. So if we can add a little water to our wooden tools, then they will create steam. And steam will become a non-stick layer, allowing us to shape with wood without it catching on fire and sticking to our glass. So we have not only a wooden block, but you'll also see Katie using this tool quite often. Does anybody know what the hand pad's made out of? Newspaper. Excellent. Newspaper is essentially grabbing hold of glass, so it's a really popular tool with glass makers. I often say as makers we want to touch the material we play with, but as glass makers it's not advisable. So we need to create tools to be able to do anything that we want in glass, and the newspaper is a really direct relationship to that soft material. I don't think we're inflating this very much. We're going to leave that as a nice shape, because now we're going to let it cool down and go back into our furnace again. I can already see those windows starting to form. It's beautiful. Now, another thing that I really love about this technique that she's working with is that as you stretch and fold, stretch and fold, stretch and fold those different canes together, you do get subtle little trapped air inside of that pattern. But those little bubbles are also trapped in between layers of striped glass. So it creates this beautiful webbed pattern with little constellations stuck in the center of it as it all inflates. And there's only a certain level of control over how those wiggles are going to happen. But because of the shape and the design that she's put these canes in, most of those shapes will be a beautiful up and down, straight along the form, kind of like a really nice wood grain pattern. Now, in general, these pipes are made of stainless steel, so they're pretty comfortable to hold on to. They'll dissipate their heat quite a bit because of the stainless steel. If it was copper, that would be a whole other conversation. It would just keep getting hotter and hotter and hotter. But because we want to make sure and hold as close to the glass as possible for ergonomic reasons, Chris just took some time to cool down that pipe a little bit, making it a little easier to hold it a little closer. But in general, glassblowers do not wear gloves. I know it's a really popular question. Why aren't you wearing gloves? That's terrifying. There's so much heat involved in what you're doing. But I like to think of it as like working in a kitchen. You don't need your hot pads the whole time you're in the kitchen, only when you're going to grab something hot. So if we can apply the rules that, well, I grab the pan by its handle, not by the pan itself. I know that the oven surface is really hot, so I'm not going to touch that. So if I come into the hot shop with those same kind of principles, I know that the shiny places on the pipe are the comfortable place to hold on to, and the dark places are definitely not where I want to hold on to. I would get burned pretty badly. So as long as we keep those rules in mind, we keep ourselves very safe, and gloves just make it unsafe for grabbing things that you shouldn't. But look at that beautiful second gather. There you go. Beautiful. Now we wanted to get just a nice even thin layer on the surface, so she drained some of that excess glass right into the bucket. We got a great view on our screens right now showing just that hot boiling water, how quickly it will start to happen when you get hot glass over 2,000 degrees dumped into that bucket. But we like to recycle a lot of our clear glass here at the museum. So we can contain that in that nice clean bucket, and that will keep that glass in good condition so we can shovel it right back into our furnace later on. So now we've got all the glass that we need for this project. So now the outside is still really hot, the inside's still a little cold because we had that nice rigidity. So some of the first few moments of glass blowing is also just allowing things to balance out in temperature. She wants to soak good heat into the core so that as we start to inflate, everything will start moving as we wish. And in general, that's how we shape our objects out of glass. Control the temperature. We know that over 2,000 degrees, our glass is going to be very, very soft and very fluid. We also know that when it gets down to about 1,000 degrees, it's rigid and really can't be shaped at that point. And if it gets much below 1,000 degrees, we run the risk of it cracking. So we just live in around 1,000-degree range, and that's Fahrenheit. But we just get it hot where we want to see change and keep it slightly colder where we don't want it to change. So we'll see Katie doing a lot of steps to either heat, cool, or balance temperatures as she's working. So holding the newspaper on the bottom to help cool and structure, while she has Chris inflating slightly. Do you want a shield or are you okay with your Steve? Okay. So this is a very traditional way of working as well, seeing at least two people helping each other out. Gives Katie's hands a little bit of a rest as Chris is reheating things for her. Cutting in the jack line next?
Not yet.
Not yet. A little more inflation. Now, as we're forming our pieces, the tips of those bubbles go into the furnace first and come out last. So the bottom of the bubbles tend to want to stay the hottest. So if we just inflate as willy-nilly, then the bottom's just going to go really thin and the top won't inflate. So she's taking a little time to counterbalance that natural tendency, build up heat in the top so that the bottom will stay nice and hot. All right, so we had a question online. What is Katie making? Katie's going to be making a beautiful, tall, thin vessel that'll be slightly flattened and have all these beautiful up and down striations because of the use of all this white cane that she's added to the inner portion of this bubble. So right now, we're just still in the bubble phase, but we're starting to inflate. We'll stretch it out, and we'll end up building this really tall, beautiful form out of that piece. So for those of you who might have joined us a few minutes after we got going, I just want to reintroduce the one, the only Katie Hubbs. Yes. She is our featured artist today for the Bring the Heat series. And this piece will eventually go on sale in our shops. This is a program that we put together in connection with our shops here at the Corning Museum of Glass. They have a wide variety of pieces from local and regional artists here available for sale. And usually we don't sell a lot of the demonstration pieces that we make, but this is an exception to the rule in this special program that this piece will eventually go into the shops for sale. And the ones that we had prior, Chris Rochelle had a series, his sold right away. You got Michael Beam has his available as well. And you can see those both in person and online. That was beautiful teamwork. One of the most critical steps in glassmaking is to make sure that you can remove the piece you work so hard for off that iron in a clean and constructive way. Without putting a tight constriction guiding where you want it to break, glass tends to shatter very catastrophically. So now that we've got a nice tight jack line in the top section, now we can start to really work on the rest of that form, making it even taller and inflating it even more. It does look heavy, doesn't it? And you know, when you put something on the end of a 4-foot pole, it's even heavier than the physical weight of the glass on the end of that iron. So while we might only have about 10 pounds worth of glass here, it probably feels closer to 20 or 25 pounds on the end of that 4-foot pole. So this partnership of not only reheating and taking the pipe, but Chris is also blowing into that pipe for Katie, and that gives her a lot better control. She can be down on the business end, watching and guiding that form into shape so that it doesn't accidentally blow too big or too thin or get too long as she was holding it down and blowing into the pipe for herself. So she just communicates with Chris and says, you know, start blowing, blow harder, blow softer. And he reacts to everything that Katie needs. You can make a lot of glass by yourself, but it's a lot more fun if you bring somebody else along for the ride, and it makes everything a lot easier. So there we go, beautiful dropout. You've got to get just the right temperature set up to be able to have a nice, successful drop like that. And a lot of this also comes down to just not allowing the glass to get cold. If you lose that core heat in the bubble and then you try to reheat it, it's going to heat from the outside first. So it'll kind of unbalance some of your temperatures. So she's keeping it really hot and really moving this whole time until she gets the form established so that we get really beautiful transitions from top to bottom and side to side. There we go, really drawing it out. We're going for kind of a tall form that's small on the top, small on the bottom, with a nice fat center. Beautiful. All right, I think now that we've got it inflated, you can see how those windows are starting to form, are really showing off that pattern. But we're gonna take that one step further. I love this. We could leave this as a nice round vessel, and that's gorgeous. But when you flatten things, it really changes your perspective of what you're looking at. So they're gonna set up some subtle temperature and use a set of corks. Now cork, it's just cork. It's on a wooden handle here. But cork is a really great tool to shape glass with because it's not going to burn to the surface, it's not going to leave texture. So we're going to use those corks to squeeze that glass and flatten the vessel just a little bit. By doing so, this will establish really where those windows are on the piece and guide the viewer's eyes in a very direct way. Beautiful. How are we doing on questions? Anything else out there? Yes. How do you make the glass different colors? Great question. So if we take our glass formula, we work with soda lime glass, which is silica sand, soda ash, and limestone, then we need to add a metal oxide into that. So if you think things like iron will give you green, cobalt will give you dark blue, manganese would give you purple, gold chloride gives you pink. So if you have those metals mixed in with the raw materials of your base glass, that will form a color. And then we don't make our own colors. We tend to buy our colors. There's a company called Reichenbach in Germany that's been making those colors for centuries. So they've got all the chemistries. They make a consistent product. And then we can just order it off the internet. Once we have that color, we can use it in two different forms. We buy our color either in frit form, which is little particles of solid glass that's just been broken into little pieces, or we can buy it in bar form, which is just the same product in a solid bar chunk. Now, to make all of these cane, Katie actually used the solid color, picked up a chunk of it, gathered clear over top of it, and pulled it out into a long string, and that gave her her individual canes. Anytime you use the frit, it's going to give you more of a polka dot effect. So we got a lot of examples down here of things that have little polka dots all over them, and that's just those little particles melting into the surface. But anytime you're using the frit, you can kind of roll it onto the surface of any number of blobs of glass. But anytime you're using the solid color, you really have to start with that in the core of the vessel. Maybe add that to the pipe first, gather your clear glass, and when you inflate it, that's going to give you a smooth and even coloration as opposed to the more polka dotty effect. But you can mix and match those colors and those products in different ways to create unlimited number of patterns. Great question, though. Was there? I think there was another hand out there somewhere. No. Okay. So to make sure that we're squishing this in just the right position, while it's not moving around really crazily, they're going to mark that pipe with a set of chalk. So that chalk mark will just be a good reference point so that when they go to flatten it, they make sure that it flattens in just the view that Katie wants. All right. How you doing, Katie? I was going to say, I was just about to give a shout out to the mom and pop hubs out there. I'm sure are tuned in. Now she's watching. Awesome. Yeah, big shout out. Katie's got a great family, and I'm sure they're tuning in, wishing her well. Kansas City, Missouri, representing here in the house. So look at that beautiful squish. As long as Katie keeps it moving, it's not going to leave any texture, and she's not trying to do a super squish. She just wants to, oval it just a little bit. I think now that it's a little squished, she's going to rethink a little bit of that angle. Yeah, Katie grew up in Kansas City, Missouri, went to Emporia State University, earning a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree. And that's a very common way for a lot of contemporary glass workers to learn glass, is to go through a university program, earning a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree or a master's. We also have a wonderful opportunity here at the Corning Museum of Glass. We've got the studio, which is a public access studio, and that means that anyone and everyone can come and access that material, take a class, take a workshop, do a make-your-own project, and that's a really wonderful way to learn the process of glass making. And even professionals that have gone through university programs still gravitate towards those classes that we offer over there as continuing education. So I highly suggest, though, they are super popular. I know that the fall classes just came out listing, I think on the 15th, I want to say. And I was looking at it, and there's a lot of them that are already on wait list. So if you're interested in taking classes here at the museum, keep in tune with our website, get onto the mailing list, make sure that you get that information early so that you can make sure and assure your space. And if you're coming to just do a make your own, those are usually, you can schedule them when you arrive, but it's always advisable to book them online in advance to assure that you get the opportunity to make the object or the project that you want to. There we go. That's a beautiful flatten. I like that perspective better. We got a great seam of clear right down the edge. And this will be so lovely once you see inside. The outside perspective is one thing, but when you look through that window at the inside of all those little striations and cane and the light coming into that form, oh, it's just going to be gorgeous. You're going to love it. It's going to be hard to capture when it's all hot, but we will, of course, have this as part of our live stream series on our YouTube channel, and we'll take a great picture of it to put on to the end of that live stream that once it goes onto our YouTube channel. And, of course, the shops will have some really beautiful images of this piece when it is put for sale in our shops, and you can do book that online, or you can, of course, come and arrange for purchase right here at the museum. Because I see a lot of new holiday things coming into the shops out there. We got a lot of boxes showing up in the hallways, so there's going to be lots of new, beautiful products coming out. So you definitely want to check the online and in person for those holiday shopping. All right. So I think we've got the squish in the shape that she'd like. We often use torches to help rebalance temperatures slightly, making sure that things are moving and keeping it just the right temperatures. So she's just kind of allowing the rest of it to cool down and keeping the top a little hot. All right, so we want to make sure that the bottom of this piece, of course, is nice and flat, so it sits proudly on the table. But we don't want to get it too hot and have the whole thing squish and ruin that beautiful taper that she has on the bottom. So we like to gravitate towards using torches to spot heat in very specific regions. So she's using that torch to just heat up that little mass of clear, and we'll be able to squish that to make a nice bottom for this piece. Now she is using a graphite paddle to do this. If you were to put dry wood paddle, which was what we normally have on hand, up against that really hot glass, it would end up sticking and creating wood ash on the surface and kind of making a mess. So the graphite's really nice, it's nice and clean, and you get a pristine surface. You got a question? I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand. Yes. How long have we been working for? Yeah, Katie's been working with glass for a little over 11 years. She's got really good hands for a young glassmaker. She is a full-time staff here at the Corning Museum of Glass as well, so she works with our team every day doing daily demonstrations, and she's really become a go-to person for working with guest artists as well. So we do a wide variety of activities here at the museum, lots of guest artists, lots of daily demonstrations, specialty projects, and she is in the heart of all of that. So yes, it's been really wonderful having her. She's been here at the museum only about 5 years. I'm sorry, Kate, I can take that if you need. Yeah. So now that we've got the bottom half of this finished, we're going to go ahead and transfer it off the original blowing iron and trade it over onto a secondary iron called a punty. This is a process that's very typical of handmade glass, but not something that you'll see with machine-made glass. Chris has gathered a small amount of glass on a solid iron and is shaping it in a very specific way. We want this connection to be hot enough to stick, but not too hot, otherwise it'll bond too strongly. If we can make this a weak connection, we can get it to remove easily at the end of the process, leaving no more than just a little scar mark on the bottom of the piece. So if you're looking for handmade glass, look for the little scar mark on the bottom. It's a good telltale sign. It's flexing a little bit, yeah. Now we need to coordinate our timing, temperature, and teamwork to make this go successfully. So I take a short flash, Chris takes a short flash. Katie's put a nice tight constriction line at the top. This will help guide that glass and where it breaks. Without a nice tight constriction line, it takes catastrophic breaking, to remove a piece. There we go, nice and centered. We're going to make sure that it's set up enough that it's not going to be flopping around on him. But if we wait too long, it could get too cold. There's a lot of critical timing, temperature, and teamwork to make this move go successfully. Little water right on that line. And a light tap. Beautiful job. Let's give the team a big round of applause. Woo! All right, so now we've got this piece flipped around the other direction, and now we can start to focus on finishing up the opening of this piece. Now we've got lots of options. We could pull it really wide, we could leave it really narrow, but I know that Katie wants to go for that nice, tall, thin on the top, thin on the bottom, so a little opening at the top section. But that's going to take a little bit of cleaning up and coordinating, trimming away some excess glass off the top. So we got a little bit more prep work to do before we get there. How are we doing on our questions? Any other curiosities? No? Silent bunch today. All right, no problem. Do we ever get burned? You know, burns are a hazard of the job. They do happen, but they don't usually happen too often catastrophically, and they usually happen a lot more when we're home cooking than we do here in the hot shop. So yeah, it can happen. We are surrounded by hot things, of course, but as I mentioned earlier, we really learn what's hot and what's not hot. So we really try hard not to touch the hot things and avoid getting burned as much as possible. But they do happen. Luckily, I don't think it's been a while since I've seen Katie get burned, so that's good. I probably just jinxed you, though. I'm sorry. That's not a good thing to say. But part of, you can see that Katie's wearing a yellow sleeve here today. And this is a Kevlar sleeve. It's not fireproof, but it is fire resistant. So it will help shield her arm from all the intense heat as she works. You okay? Okay. So now she's warmed up the top edge. She uses tweezers to pull and lengthen the top edge of that piece. And this really is a great example of that teamwork. Now, Chris and Katie work together quite often, almost every day, and so they have to really be in sync to make this work. So Chris is turning at a certain pace. Katie is tweezing at a certain pace, because essentially Chris is Katie's left hand at the bench right now. Normally you can turn with your left hand and you use your right hand to use the tools, and you're doing subtle little stops and starts to counteract whatever gravity is affecting your piece at the time. But this is a really tall piece, and Katie's got a pretty good wingspan, but that's stretching it a little far. And when you get way out there, you're also exposed to all that heat as you're working. So being able to step outside the bench really gives her a lot more freedom, but it really relies a lot on Chris to help her out. You want to shield or anything? Okay. So cutting in, turning only as fast as Katie's cutting. Look at that. Pro moves right there. Pro moves. Beautiful. Now, by doing all that trimming, we've reshaped the glass, but we've also created a much more refined top edge. Beautiful. And you know, I love that you got a little trail now, because now we can maybe set this aside for people to look at after the show, so you can see kind of a little bit of the pattern, because of course this will end up cooling down overnight, so we won't be able to take a look at it until tomorrow. Good call. So since we have such a beautiful, tall, thin form, again, using those torches help focus heat, she wants to flare that open just a little bit, real subtly at the top of the form. So if you get it too hot, too deep, you can end up bending the shoulders as you go to lift that up. Do you need a paddle on the bottom? Around the top, I mean? How's our online community doing? I think we're good. Nice. I'd like to welcome everybody from online as well. You're free to ask questions. All right. So you can see how that's a little bit at a time. If you kind of do too much too quickly, sometimes that can end up squishing things that you don't want. So really just coaxing that in a little bit at a time to get it just right. Just right. But again, this is part of our Bring the Heat series here at the Corning Museum of Glass. We've already had a couple. Chris started us out with a beautiful spaceship earlier in the season. You want to work outside the bench for a second? Want to work outside the bench for a second? You can see it. But if you were able to tune in, I want to say 2 weeks ago when Michael Beam made his beautiful ice-inspired piece, that's available now in the shops and online. For more fun events from the shops, please follow us along on Instagram or Facebook at Corning Museum Shops. I'm sure a lot of you are already connected with the Corning Museum social medias, but there's 2, so make sure you check it. Well, actually, there's 3, because there's one for the studio as well. But link into all those, and it'll give you special VIP looks at what's happening here at the museum. But we created this Bring the Heat series to really spotlight the expert glassmakers that we have here on our team at the Corning Museum of Glass and showcase their creativity and expertise. So these are all personal designs. A lot of times in our daily demonstrations, we're just making fun things that represent examples from our collection, really kind of bringing the collection to life. But this particular series is really featuring personal designs, personal interests in that creative realm. But Katie's decided it's a little too thick. She wants to trim it once again and get rid of a little bit more of that glass. Beautiful. The next, Bring the Heat, we have one more with Jesse Rassid on September 5th. And since we'll be in our regular winter hours by then, it won't be at 5:30. Instead, it'll be at 3 p.m. from 3 to 4 o'clock. So if you're here in-house, of course, you can come to the demo as part of your daily entrance. Otherwise, you can tune in online, just like you did today, from 3 to 5 on September 5th for our final Bring the Heat with Jesse Rassid. We're also gearing up for a lot of really fun activities here this fall. And we've got a series of the Great Pumpkin Experiment. We're going to be making pumpkin-themed demos with inspiration every Friday and Sunday here at the museum. So keep an eye on our social media. That should be coming out soon about those. But the best way to really keep connected with the upcoming events is to become a member here at the museum and to tune into our social media groups. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Nice. I keep hearing encouraging statements from Travis in the audience. Travis, here with Katie. Dynamic duo. So now she's got this really beautiful, refined, tiny opening on the top. And so she wants to, it's over here. I'll get it hot and ready. So now we're going to just give a little bit of air, puff the top of that form up to just strengthen out the shoulders of the piece. So we've got a tool called a Sophietta. Sophietta's kind of a replacement blowpipe. If it has a bent tube, then that's one that you use for yourself. If it's got a straight tube, you need an assistant. Now, with such a long piece, you'll notice that after we finish every move, she uses the torch just a little bit. We don't want that punny to get too cold or the bottom of the piece to get too cold. One of the things about soda lime glass is it does expand and contract as it heats and it cools. So if we end up having too cold and it gets too cold and it starts to shrink unevenly, we run the risk of cracks forming. So we take a lot of heat maintenance when you're blowing glass, making sure that nothing gets too cold and you're only maintaining those perfect temperatures. Aww. I got friends coming out of the woodwork here for Katie today. It's really lovely. We got a really nice community of glass blowers here in Corning, and non-glass blowers. Good? Okay. All right. All right, folks, I think that's going to be our final shape. Beautiful. So now we just need to kind of balance out those temperatures, make sure that everything is nice and even in temperature before we allow this glass to cool down really slowly. Since it does expand and contract as it heats and it cools, if we were to leave it out for you to look at it, it would end up cracking by the time we got everybody a good view. So we're going to tuck this away into our annealing oven. Annealing ovens are designed to cool glass in nice, slow, and controlled ways so that it can shrink evenly. And this will take at least an overnight cycle. We'll probably give it a little extra just to make sure it's safe and sound. Because again, this is going to be up for sale through our shops here at the museum. And there's only one of them. So if you're interested, definitely contact the shop sooner than later. Get yourself on the list. And maybe if it's that popular, Katie can continue this as a series in the continued support. But this is Katie Hubb's personal design, all that beautiful filigrane cane folded and overlapped into multitudes of layering, creating all sorts of lovely effects on this final piece. Those windows will really show off that cane beautifully, in addition to giving you a view of the inside with all the little bubbles that are trapped. This is definitely one to see up close and personal, and we'll get some good video or good images of it to put onto our social media and onto the shops. Yes. A little bit of water on that temporary connection. Are we torching, Katie?
Yes, torching.
Okay.
Carolyn, grab it.
Yep. Oh, beautiful, Punny. We're going to torch the bottom to avoid any cold working. I see a little chunk. Okay. And there we go, our final look at that beautiful piece. Away we go into our oven for safekeeping. And the crowd gives a thunderous round of applause for Katie Hubbs, Chris Rochelle. Woo, that is a gorgeous piece. Beautiful. All right, folks, sadly, that's the end of our glass demonstration here today. So we'd like to thank everyone here in person and online for tuning in. Again, if you want to see this again, we will have it on our YouTube channel here in about a week. It takes some little time to process, but thank you so much and have a wonderful evening.